Hello everyone. I know that at this point you have been playing a few games. I also know you have a lot of questions. I know you're having trouble to deliver checkmate, but that's okay. All I need you to be doing at this point is playing and getting the hang of capturing your opponent's pieces. That's it. If you are taking it a step further and you're actually paying attention to your opponent's moves every time, that's even better. But again, all I need you to be doing is to play, develop your pieces, and try to capture anything that comes your way. So that way you develop that vision of the board. If you still cannot actually do checkmate efficiently, that's fine because you're gonna get that as you play more. And also, I'm going to show you guys specific methods that you can use to deliver checkmate, like a formula that if you learn it and you follow the steps, it's going to be checkmate no matter what. But before we get to that point, you have to keep playing, you have to keep understanding how your pieces move, and we have to go over the three rules that I mentioned in the last class. We have to go over promotion, castling, and passant. So let's get to it. The first one has to do with the pawns, and that one is promotion. So what is promotion? Well, let me put this king over here, this king over here, and I'm going to bring two pawns on the board. So we already know that pawns are not that powerful. They can only move straight forward. They only capture diagonally one step. But there's a privilege that pawns have. And that privilege is that if any of the pawn makes it to the other side of the board, that pawn could become another piece. And that's what we call promotion. So basically the pawn could become a rook, a bishop, a knight, or a queen. And you're going to see what I mean. In this position, we only have the kings with a pawn each. And the only way for them to actually win the game, they have to promote into a queen or a rook and then deliver checkmate. So this is how it happens. I want to get here as quickly as I can. So instead of going one step, I'm at the very beginning. I have it moved, so I could go two steps. Then the black pieces move two steps. And this is just a race to promote and get your piece first. So we got to the end, and notice how the computer is asking me if I want the bishop, rook, knight, or queen. In most cases, we're going to ask for the queen. The queen is the most powerful piece. Some specific cases you want to under promote to a knight, bishop, or rook. But it's very important that I highlight this because when you play online, these are the only options you get. When you play in person, you need to remember that the pawn cannot remain a pawn. Once you get to the end, he needs to become something else. But the pawn also cannot become a king. We cannot have two kings of the same color on the board. So I'm going to choose my queen, and there we go. And now this queen is so powerful that when the black pawn promotes, let's say he gets a queen 2, now my queen can go diagonally all the way and capture that queen. And now the white pieces should be able to do checkmate with the queen and the king. So that's what promotion is all about. Let me bring all of the pieces on the board. And let me give you another example. This example is going to be a little bit of an extreme, but just to make my point. So let's say I move this pawn forward. The black pieces move the knight, and I keep going. Then they move this pawn, and I move one more step. Again, here I know they could take me, but just for the sake of this example, let's say they move this bishop. Now I'm going to take this pawn. Again, they could take me, but let's pretend they move this pawn up. And now my pawn could take either the bishop or the rook. Either way, I'm going to make it to the end of the board. So I'm going to go for the rook, and look how, again, they asked me to choose a queen, knight, rook, or bishop. It doesn't really matter if you have a queen already on the board, or rooks, or knights, or bishops. You could have another queen of the board. And as a matter of fact, if all of these pawns make it to the end, which is really difficult, very unlikely, but if that happened, then you're gonna have so many more queens. So that's what promotion is, guys. It only works for pawns. Any of the other pieces could make it all the way to the other side and nothing changes. But pawns, they could promote into a bishop, knight, rook, or queen. So with that being said, I think it's time to move on to the next rule. This next rule has to do with the king and the safety of the king, actually. And let me actually remove all of the pieces like I did before, and just leave the king and the rooks at the squares that they start. So castling occurs with the king and one of the rooks. And this is the move that we do to put the king in safety. But let me show you how it works. So you're going to choose one of the rooks to do castling with the king. And this is the only time when the king is going to move 2 steps. He always moves 1 step at a time. Well, when castling, he can do 2. This is the only time when 2 pieces move at the same time in chess. And this is the only time when a piece could jump over another piece and it's not the knight. So for castling, you're going to move your king towards the rook that you choose. In this case, I'm going to go towards this rook, and I'm going to move the king 2 steps. That's how it works. 2 steps, and then the rook moves over the king, and that's castling. So all of this happens in one turn. So king and rook, they sort of swap, and that's how you castle. I could also do it to the other side, but it's also going to be 2 steps. So it was 1, 2. To the other side, it's going to go 1, 2. The rook is the one that travels a little bit further. So I go 1 and 2, and then the rook goes over the king. That's how we castle. Now, there are a few rules that we need to remember. For castling, you cannot have moved the king or the rook that you're going to use. So let's say this king at some point moved up, and then we put it right back. Well, that king can never castle for the remaining of the game. You lost the right to castle. Same thing. If this rook at some point moved, and even if you bring it back, you cannot use that rook for castling. The king could still castle to the other side, but that rook that moved cannot be used. Also, let's say we have this king here, we have the queen. Let's say the king is put in check. The queen goes over here, check. Well, the king cannot castle if he's being in check. That's a rule. Also, let's say that instead of the queen here, we have a bishop right here. Well, the king cannot castle if he's going through check. Let's say I want to castle to this side. Well, I can't because technically the king is going through this square, which is controlled by the bishop. That would be an illegal move, so I'm not allowed to castle there. So, but in this case, you could just castle to the other side.